First off, and it's tough to see, and it's okay, maybe I can see some hands. How many people have been burned by an ad agency? All right, we got some hands. How many people hate choosing an ad agency? And I mean hate it, worst thing that they could have to do. All right, and how many of you would pay big money to not have to do that ever again? All right, we still got some people, so awesome. So I'm here to chat a little bit about how to choose the right agency. Not everyone has the same experience, so I want to go through some important questions of what to ask, when to ask, how to evaluate the right partner, and to make sure it's a right fit. Because at the end of the day, the agency usually will go on, but as a founder or a founder-led business, you need to make sure that your business is in the right hands. So before I dig in a little bit more, I've talked with a lot of people here. It sounds like there's a diverse group of brands. In general, I look at D2C e-commerce as two buckets. I'll look at paid social, Facebook, Google, Shopify, or Amazon. So how many people are doing Facebook, Google to a Shopify store? Okay, about half. And Amazon? Amazon retail. Okay, cool. Good to know. This will help. So, who am I? My name is Gillmman. I'm the former Chief Revenue Officer of Mute6. We were the largest and fastest growing D2C e-com agency a couple years ago. When I joined that agency, my friend had started it, convinced me to move to LA. I put everything in my car. I got out, I moved out, and we started working together. The company at the time just did meta ads. We were 20 people, and in 5 short years, I came in as the only salesperson. I built out 30-person sales team. We scaled our organization to 450 people. We sold it to Dentsu. It was an incredible, incredible experience. But in that experience, I had the opportunity at the front end of the business to talk with thousands of brands. I mean, literally thousands of brands. I was on 7 or 8 calls a day, literally pitching, auditing, going through, asking questions, digging in. I was a liaison. And there were a lot of things that came up on those calls, which I'm going to share today. And since then, I've left. I've started in January of last year. I started a consulting agency because I saw a big hole in the market. There were a lot of agencies out there that do have good work product that are not good at communicating that in a sales and marketing message. A lot of people asked us, Greg, how are you guys so successful? And it really is a lot of sales, good work product and culture, and ultimately, great value, right? You have to make sure that you're always leveling up for brands. So I'm here to walk you through what I would do if I were in your shoes, evaluating an agency partner, give you tangible things that you can take away, questions to ask, why you want to ask them, and the answers you want to hear. So let's dig in a little bit. Now, there's a lot of skepticism around agencies not doing good work. Now, I do think that there are a lot of agencies that don't do good work, but ultimately, are they growing too fast? Are they getting too big? And one thing that I've actually seen this massive shift in the agency space, and I'll just call it the media buying space in general. COVID changed everything. Right before COVID, we were at 175 people. We were all in office. We were just finishing the transaction on our company, and I thought we were done. I'd never worked from home. I'd never been in that remote environment. All of our people, we didn't mandate to be in office, but it really was an in-office group. It changed everything. What I saw was that work from home really could work, that we were able to scale a lot more, and outside of that, the talent pool, right, kind of blurred. What I have seen since then is there's kind of a pool of media buyers. Some work at agencies, some do freelance, some do both, some work at brands, some freelance on the side. So I think if I am a brand owner, it's important to know that, and more importantly, it's also to know when you're getting into a relationship with an agency, what do they let their employees do? And so just to make sure that everyone is aware, my job here today is to share some information and hopefully help you avoid a costly mistake, because I've heard war stories. I used to joke that I felt like a 911 operator. I was like, Mute6, what's your emergency? And literally the founder would pour their heart out, crying, and they're always calling when it's bad. You're never on the sales calls when it's great. No one reaches out to an agency and says, we're killing it. There's something wrong, we need to fix something. So we're going to talk through when you're vetting them, how to make sure that we get the right partner on board. So the problem, let's talk about small brands. And I know everyone has some small brands might be like, wow, 5 million's a pretty big number. But I'm going to bucket into 3 different buckets because I think that they need 3 different sets of resources. So sub 5 million, right? The problem if you're deciding, do I go freelancer or do I go agency? If you're a brand that's doing sub 5 million, you have to remember that if you go to an agency that services businesses, ultimately, unless you are a bigger brand, right, you are always typically going to fall at the bottom sector of the people that are working on the accounts. Now, the only way that you can kind of get around that is if you have a relationship with the founder, if you have a product that's super sticky. If I had someone come with a business that was doing, $2-3 million, but I was like, if we can come in, apply our creative playbook, and grow this thing, then great. But I think freelance, if I were a brand doing sub 5 million, we'll call it maybe even sub 2.5 million, they're really good freelancers. And a lot of them do sometimes work at agencies, they have worked at brands. So the freelancers that I see today are very different than I think the freelancers that we saw a couple years ago. So I would consider that option. There are definitely smaller agencies that can service smaller brands. But if the budget for what you want to spend is such a large proportion of like your actual media spend, then the pressure on you as a founder is even greater. It's like, great, like I have to spend a lot more in the media on the service side, and the media budget isn't there. So your runway is a lot shorter, and you really have to think if that makes sense for you. And if the agency is the real deal, or you believe that they can help, it might be worth a shot, because the cheaper route is not always the best route. I used to joke with people, I still do all the time, think of the last time you tried to save money. It always backfires. Literally, anywhere in your life. I tried to cut a corner, it blew up in my face, I paid twice as much, I hate the decision I made. It's literally something that we do all the time, so why take that risk on your business? This is your livelihood. So let's talk about things that I would ask for smaller brands, right? I would ask immediately, who am I getting on the team? So if I'm a brand and I'm chatting with the agency, who is the person that I'm actually going to be working with on the team? How flexible will the agency be on the agency terms? There is no agency playbook out there that says you must do 6 months, you must do 12 months. Now, agencies will tell you, yes, there is a contract length, this is how long we need, and there is an argument to be made of why it needs to be 6 months, why it needs to be 3 months. But if you're going to negotiate with an agency, I would recommend starting maybe on contract length, right? 3 months. Month to month is tough because agency is going to put in resources into it, but it is the first litmus test when you're negotiating with an agency of how much they want your business. I wouldn't negotiate on price because if you do that, like you can nickel and dime a bit, but it will come out from somewhere else. You will get a different person on the team. Leave the price. Agencies price where they need to be. Focus on the contract length and say, look, let's give it 3 months, because we used to do 3-month contracts. I knew at the end of 90 days, if I couldn't make this work, I didn't want to work with them anyway. We had enough people that I wanted to bring the right people into our organization and make sure that we could fulfill. So let's talk about mid-sized brands, 5 to 50 million. So if you're a mid-sized brand and you've scaled via freelancers, you're at the point now where you need hyper growth. So I would focus on agencies that specialize. So since we're split, Meta, Google, and Amazon, I would focus on, if I were a Meta, Google focused with Shopify backend, I'd focus on a growth agency that has a lot of stories that talk about brands that they have done this for before. They've taken proof of concept, they've ramped you to 5 to 10 million, but what does the path from 10 to 50 look like? So it's an inflection point, because as a brand, you go through different levels of growth. Proof of concept, scaling, right, hyper growth, and then from there, you're going to have to continue to staff your brand, you're going to try and raise money, and so you never kind of want to have this, like rigid, it's like, it's better if the story goes straight up, so when you're looking for a partner, make sure that they have scaled brands and they can talk to you about what they have done tactically for those types of businesses, similar to yours. And then for larger brands north of 50 million, when you're evaluating them, you want to make sure that they know how to pull the levers that take you from 50 to 100 to 200, right? And once you scale beyond Meta and Google, and as it gets more competitive, right, things that should be in the conversation, podcast, out of home, direct mail, TV, right? These are all things that they should be talking about. They should either handle it, have partners that they work with, that they have executed on before. Don't be the guinea pig. There are plenty of agencies that can service a $50 million a year brand and have proven out how to do that. So for any brand, most important thing, let's talk about creative. Creative has been the biggest lever that you can pull for many years. There's a lot of agencies now that are saying it's the biggest lever you could pull, but that has been the same thing for many, many years. And I think as we all know, as we consume content, finding an agency that focuses on a content-heavy strategy is super important. So what you want to do, in my opinion, is stay away from groups that shoot creative to just shoot creative. Now that means there's a lot of agencies back in the day when you wanted to shoot a spot for 200, 300, 400,000, they hand it to you, they would hand it to their performance media buyers, and what happened? Guess what? It didn't perform. Go figure. It's a brand asset. It's lifestyle content. It feels good. Everyone loves shooting that content. It's so much fun to make production. But if it doesn't convert and you're a brand founder in D2C, in the D2C ecosystem, you're had a big miss. So focus on agencies that do performance creative, that understand a full funnel strategy, and that they have done this with before. So let's talk about some of the agency must-haves. These, in my opinion, are non-negotiables. Integrated creative solution. What does that mean? That means that they are media buying plus creative. They either have it in-house, they have a freelancer they use, but they are part of the ecosystem, but that is one unit. They don't parse it out. And what you really want to hear from them is that the media buyer is the one that dictates the creative that is being made, not the other way around. Ideal state. 2, understands performance creative. As we mentioned, it's super important that when you shoot content, you want to work with a partner that understands the KPI for this piece of content is return on ad spend and sales. That's it. If it doesn't perform, we're not interested. And again, there's so many shops out there that will do this. They will work on a % of the revenue that it generates. But you really want people that think like that have done this type of performance content for other brands. They know the path. They can clearly articulate to you what a path from 2 million to 5 million to 10 million to 25 million to 50 million looks like with their agency, with stories about clients that they have done this with before. Overview on the strategy. We want someone on their team that is an omni-channel specialist. This means that they sit on top of Amazon, Google, and Meta and decide and dictate. They work with the creative team and they integrate this all into one solution and share it back with you as the founder or the brand owner or the CMO or the head of growth. Data and reporting, equally important to the creative side. They use third-party tools. They have native tools. They know how to clearly articulate. There's a lot of tools that I think are just tools to be tools. They don't do much. And the people that are managing the account don't know what to do with them. So we want to work with people that understand, realistically, the main thing that we're using for is attribution at this point, because there's so many different touch points. The channels are getting tougher and tougher with tracking, so super important there. Training, how do they train their team? What types of stuff are they implementing? Media buyers, how many of them work on how many accounts? This is typically one that a lot of people do ask. My guess, if I were to take a poll right now, how many people, when you're vetting an agency, does the agency say that they have 3 to 5 accounts, each media buyer? How many? Some hands. You'll hear it afterwards. It may not be now, but next time you're on an agency pitch, my money's on 3 to 5. Does that mean they're working on 3 to 5? Potentially, but make sure that if they are, you'll feel it. And you don't know that at the outset, but that's kind of a number where I think any really good media buyer can handle. No delays, they'll onboard you immediately. And executive oversight, right? Who's the founder of the agency with the knowledge, who's sharing that with all the people on your team. And they have to believe in your product. It is really tough to scale a product that you do not believe in. So when you're meeting with the media buyers, it's important that they have a good feeling about working on your product. After you audit, when everyone leaves that call, we should feel good about it. So how do you know if an agency is the real deal, right? What I look for is, does their pitch align with what you need to be successful? How close is the story you're being told on the pitch is to what you think you need to be successful? So we want to make sure that anyone, when you're doing an evaluation of an agency, we want to make sure that anyone on your team, CMO, head of growth, is actually working in the audit process and that there's nothing lost in translation. What I've seen sometimes are CMO might not be involved, head of growth not involved, they're vetting an agency. I've done an audit, I've met the founders, everyone loves it, they pass the strategy, and there's like a break. So to save your time, which is the most valuable thing, bring everyone into the conversation as early as possible. Are they teaching, or have they done this in practice? What are the similar size brands that you have scaled? How did you do it? I'm looking for people to be very clear and articulate with the strategy. I don't need to know their client names, but I really do want to understand what they've done, and are they just talking about it? I can't tell you how many times I hear people pitching, and I'm like, there's no way they did that. Or it just doesn't sound good. The other thing that I really like to do all the time, I ask open-ended questions and I pause. I don't want to bait anyone into an answer. I really want to see what they have to say. So one thing that I like to ask is, how is what you're doing different than what other agencies are doing? And how is it different than what we are currently doing? We meaning the brand. And I ask that because are they the agency that's like, we're best at email, but they only know their email agency? Do they know the 5 other competitors in their space? You know, if they are self-aware of what else is out there, it's better because then they can articulate clearly why they are better than the other solution. And outside of that, I think it's important that if they can clearly articulate during their audit process why what they are doing is better than what you are doing. How do you train your team? What's the process like? How long do they need to be here? Where do you hire your people from? These are important things because at the end of the day, the agency is only as good as the people who are working on your account. Small agencies. So let's talk a little about red flags. So there's a couple things that I'll look for where ultimately we'll call them red flags. They may not be for everyone, but sometimes small agencies under, I'll call it maybe 10 or 15 people that do everything well. And when I ask them, I'm like, what are you really good at? And they can't articulate that. It's like that saying, jack of all trades, master of none. That's right. And it's really interesting when you find those groups because they may have one person that does this, one person that does that. And it's not to say that those people are not good at that one thing, but the really good agencies that are good at scaling accounts take the opposite approach. They're like, let's hire as many people on certain services and scale those services, because what you also need to understand as an agency that you do want to work with more accounts. The more accounts you have visibility into, the more accounts you can pass knowledge from one brand to the other. Another red flag, agencies that have enterprise logos, they seem big, they seem aspirational, but they actually have bad work product. I think that a lot of people get lost on the logos sometimes, don't always follow that. Some people even, I've heard of putting logos of clients they haven't even worked on, even bigger red flag. If the agency's client roster doesn't align with the size of your brand, also, do all of their client logos look really big? I used to get this asked all the time. Are we going to be the smallest in your portfolio? Are we going to be the biggest, right? You know, if you're an SMB agency that goes after a company that does hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion in revenue, they don't want to be the biggest one there. So figuring out where you sit inside their client roster, lack of internal training, media buyers who only understand their channel. We don't want Meta, you know, it's like if there's Meta buyers who only understand Meta and Google who only understand Google, not that I want one doing the media buying for the other, but I do want them to have a good idea of when you pull one lever, what happens on the other side. Do they have a high level of client and staff churn? Glassdoor usually tells an interesting story. I usually look at that in any of the partners. And it's funny, for anyone who has like had a bad run on Glassdoor, that's okay, but there is some semblance of what's going on within an organization. Not having an opportunity to meet the exact team who will be working on your account. Now, not every agency is set up like that. Not every agency will do that. But if I were a brand, I would say 100%, I want to meet the people who are going to work on my account. It happens a lot. Some brands and agencies shy away from it. And I think that's almost, in my opinion, that's like the first red flag right there that I'd say might not be a fit. Again, you are bolting yourself to the people who are working in that agency, not necessarily just the agency. So here are some of the questions that I would ask the team directly if I were on the call. So what are some of your success stories for similar types of brands? I want to know, is the media buyer good at CRO? Have they given things that are outside of the box that I can actually make tangible decisions and say, yes, they know what they're doing or not? The goal is to understand that they think that they'll be leading and not the other way around. How many people have been like, I'm paying this agency, but I'm leading the strategy? I've heard it a million times. The earlier we can get in and figure out, is this someone who has built out structure and media bought against similar companies, the better. This is a specific question to the team. What is your client retention rate? How long have you had the clients that you had? I think also super important, and it's one that a lot of people don't ask, right? Because it's like, well, if you've had a lot of clients for a long time, it's usually like a great sign that you're doing a good job. What other channels do you know how to run? I mentioned it earlier when we were talking Meta and Google, but what I want to see is like, how well do you work together as a team? When I show up on an audit call, is every media buyer meeting the other one for the first time, or do they seem like they have camaraderie? Do they seem like they're friends? Do they work together? Because the agency, it's in their best interest to put people on an audit who have worked together, who are friendly, that are going to sell your agency services. So the sales process itself is a sales process. It should always be best foot forward. If there are misses on the front, I guarantee there are misses on the back. I have not worked with one agency, both pre and post my last organization, where I don't see that. Something on the front triggers 10 things wrong that are on the back. So the more people that, the agency that puts the time into thinking about what is the onboarding of the client, the sales process, to the onboarding, to the servicing as one unit rather than one and then not the other. I ask media buyers, why do you do this? What is it that you enjoy doing about this? Because I also want to know what makes them tick. Are they doing this because they want to bolster and they want to have a singing career and they really don't care about media buying, but they might be good? You know, are they going to walk out the door? Agency churn is high with media buyers. So like, I want to know, are they really into it? Do they love being at the agency that they are at? Super important. My favorite question, I ask this on every single interview for every single candidate that I ask, and I put it on here because I was like, I haven't vetted agencies like this, but I would if I were on the other side. And the last question I always ask, I say, why should I hire you? And I pause. Some people get nervous, some people talk, but it's a good point, it's a good time where they can get in front, give you their elevator pitch. You know that that's going to be the most important thing that's top of mind for them, but I think it'll be a great one to ask. So agency, in-house, freelancer, right? Here's my take. If you choose the right agency, I think it'll provide more value than doing in-house, right? I know a lot of people that even went from our past agency that would work in-house, or I know a lot of media buyers who are out there who go in-house. What happens? 3 to 6 months down the road, Greg, I'm bored. I have bandwidth, right? Now that brand that's like told me, Greg, we don't want to work with agencies. We want to hire full time. I'm like, great. You carry the salary 100% of the time, while that media buyer will freelance 50% of their time. So it switches the dynamic. And to say that it doesn't happen is you can't do that. You can't neglect it. It's like one of those things, I'm sharing some of this stuff with you. So it's like when you're out there, you understand, because as a founder, you want to make sure that like that's okay, but just know that that's okay with you and that's okay with the group that they work for. So they freelance typically because they're bored or they have bandwidth, and they go from agencies and then they work in-house, and they're used to managing 5, 6, 7 accounts. So going in-house at a brand is actually not as challenging as people think. Another pro to working with an agency over in-house, you can fire an agency tomorrow. I don't know, I know we're in Toronto. I came in from LA, our company was in California. Try firing someone in California. It'll literally take you a year. So if I want to call up an agency, I'm like, you're done, that's it. And it's a contract, that's it. But hiring and firing people just in general is really tough. There's liability. So just having the flexibility of being able to do that does help. And outside of that, I think that the biggest pitch that we would have for working with an agency is like, we're scaling the best brands. As everyone in this room knows, it is really tough, it is competitive, and it's not really about this brand versus this brand, right? It's all of us versus these algorithms to try and extract the lowest cost per customer as possible. So any insight you can get from a brand that's in a similar vertical, from a different vertical, this is all super helpful. So I think overall, if I were to say, it's like there are things that you do want to hire in-house, but having an agency that is really good at what you do, that you can agree on the right structure, the deal structure, equally important. I had a client tell me once, he goes, Greg, if you price yourself 10 or 15% higher than what it would cost me to do it in-house, it's a no-brainer, right? Because I know if I could call you, I can be a little harder on you, and if it doesn't work out, you can just swap the players on your team, right? I have to fire someone, I have to interview someone, it's a nightmare. So 2 last things I'm going to leave you with, I think, to make sure that set you up, whether it's set you up for success, whether it's with a freelancer or an agency. 1, hire a really good growth lead, either in-house or a consultant. Fractional growth lead can work to start on a smaller brand, have them give you a couple hours a week, because you need that person to interface with the agency, with the media buyer. And what I find sometimes is founders try and moonlight this never works. It's too much time. If you are not a media buyer, if you're not good with data, if you don't understand the creative time, hire for it. Don't cut corners. Number 2, I've talked a lot about what the agencies do, but I can tell you, clients are assholes too. Be a good client, right? Don't be rude, don't be mean. And the best clients I ever worked with, I worked with Theragun. Does everyone know Theragun? Therabody? Yeah, so they're great. I worked with them, we started working together. They were a 20-person company. After our 4-year relationship, I think they were a 500-person company. Massive growth. What made them a good client? 1, they were willing to test everything. They didn't cut corners, they were willing to invest. They did a lot of things that we were not in charge of. We handled performance. They were doing a lot of things on the brand, on the influencer side. They did not shy away from testing. We failed many times, not on a ton of things, but we did fail. But they would always lean in. They were like, how do we do more? How do we do more? And don't be afraid to not ask for more because of the cost. You never know what someone will do or the partnership that people want. Be inquisitive, want to learn more, want to do more. Because remember, at the end of the day, it is your livelihood on the line. And that's it. I'll leave it for Q&A, but thank you very much. I try to talk as fast as possible. I'll open it to any question. Hold on, sorry, one more time.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. What advice would you give to a brand to properly fire an agency?
How to fire them?
Yes.
Yeah. So is it a performance issue? Is it?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I would say.
But is there? I guess sometimes I run into 7 months down the road. I'm like, shit, I didn't get that report for that I should have, or like.
Yeah.
What's the closing procedure that would make me more successful hiring the new person?
Here's what I would do. Every agency, once you flag that you are a churn risk to them, you move to the top of the let's make sure we keep them pile. So what I would do is I'd send an email, say, hey, look, it's been great. Here are a couple points that I'm concerned about. The reporting, the media buyer, whatever it is, be very clear and concise. And you don't have to say I'm going to leave. They know you're going to leave if they don't solve for it. And see how quickly they jump on it. Because sometimes you need a new team member. People get complacent. So I would say, like, make sure that you're vocal about it. In the same last piece where I was like, don't be rude, but be like, this is my business and we need to do it. So show the urgency, and I think you'll be met with urgency.
Thank you for your presentation. There's been a lot of hype around artificial intelligence and the creation of these AI agents that are apparently transforming the way media buying is done, creative is created. I wanted your opinion as somebody who's been in the industry for so long. How do you see their impact in the short, medium, and long term? And how will it impact the journey that you just shared with us?
Yeah, great question. So where do I see AI? There's definitely areas where I think it could be leveraged, right? From the back-end side, ops, process, things like that. From the creative side, I think there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do. To be honest, I'm not sure when you look at like the OpenAI stuff, if like that's really the direction, because it's like, there's a lot there, right? I think that on the media buying side, the platforms themselves are becoming more automated, PMax, ASC, things like that. So naturally, like the AI within the platforms makes it easier where it becomes more of a content game. So I think there's definitely tools on the creative side that can help you do more with less. So I think that's the number one biggest impact, like immediate. And I know there's even a couple of people here I've talked to, vendors who like do that type of stuff. On the media buying side, I'm not sure. Like, do I think that there's a total removal of agencies or media buyers? I don't, because even when you're working with a client and something goes wrong, right? Like, it's better to have a person to be able to communicate with, right? Like, again, in the spirit of like, this is your livelihood and your business, like you want to make sure that we still have like human contact. Business is still done person to person. So I think it's smaller groups doing more with AI. I do think the bigger agencies have a bigger, more existential threat, we'll say, because it's like they're so kind of like top heavy and so kind of far behind on a lot of this disruption that I think you'll see a lot more like 10-person shops that can take on many more clients, service them on a human level, but use tools to like automate and scale a lot of those things.
Just a quick question with regards to how media buying has evolved over the last year, or even kind of post iOS 14. I run my own business, and I actually did my own media buying for the first 8 months of it. And when I was doing it, there was a lot of like retargeting, detailed targeting. There was a lot of kind of like campaign structuring. And now that everything has evolved into more of like an automated structure, we've outsourced now to an agency. So my question is, how much value do I put on the media buying versus the content creating?
Yeah.
Because it's gone from all these different ways to structure campaigns and cost caps and all that stuff to now basically you can upload content with one button. So for an agency to provide value, is it more so on their ability to have good creatives, volume of creatives, versus the media buying side?
Yeah, great question. I think it's still a combination of both, because what I found was that when we're running the agency, a lot of a media buyer's time, right, is consumed with, if you can build tools that can make a media buyer be able to work on more accounts where it doesn't disrupt work product, great. Because what you really want the media buyer to be is almost like a mini CMO. Ideal state is that they're not doing content, they're not scripting content themselves, they have a great partner, right? On the media buying side, there's maybe more automation that you can add in, but where you want like a really good media buyer who now will be like more head of growth is looking into like more omni-channel and like how the channels interact with each other. Because I think the problem is right now with all the media agencies is they're siloed, and they're only siloed because everyone's so busy that no one has time to really like oversee everything. So what you have to do now is hire someone else to come oversee them. In a future state, I think that the media buyers become more of the overseers managing the tools and the people and the platform, because you don't want a head of growth who's never been a media buyer. I see people make that mistake as well. Always want someone who's done it themselves so they can jump in if they need to. So as we look as like as I mentioned, I think the freelancer and the agency space has changed where people are getting better at what they do. So as they level up, the question is, can they be like more of a managerial role, like a head of growth that can leverage all the different things? But I don't think it ever really goes away. But I also think there will be a big consolidation, because what I see now is also tons of agencies, right? There's 90,000 agencies out there right now, which is pretty crazy. But I think there's going to be a consolidation, and you have a lot of businesses that have ramped. They hired during COVID. They are overstaffed now. And the question is like, what do I do with this thing? Because realistically, they never might have thought about selling it before, but they've put 2, 3, 4 years into a business where it's gone up. Now it's a bit flat. So I talk with a lot of business owners about that, and I think that's also an inflection point where you'll see less agencies. There's also groups that are buying agencies. So it's like that also comes into play as well. Cool. Thank you.
Give it up for Gillman!
Thank you very much. Thank you.